Hello, I'm Daniela. Welcome to Stitch with Me in 2023, month 6. We're on our 6th prompt halfway through the year. Just like always, all previous prompts can be found below, and we have a Facebook group where you can post your work and questions and inspirational photos. Today's prompt, well, let's get right to it. Today's prompt is Deep Sea. It's a really fun prompt that encompasses anything having to do with the sea, underwater, anything maybe nautical. You can take this wherever you want to go. I had some really fun ideas with this one. It didn't pan out exactly as I wanted, but I'm pleased with it. It's not one of my best, but it's also not one of my worst, and that's always a good thing. So let's get started.
So this project's kind of exciting to me. I just love the ocean and all things associated with it. So I have my card here for my month of June, just so I know the size. And then I have something in mind. I'm going to create a group of jellyfish. And did you know that a group of jellyfish is called a smack? I think that's kind of funny. So what I'm going to do is start by creating the background. Now, because it's a water scene, I have this panel that I used in my previous Stitch With Me prompt, which has beautiful colors. But because I want to use this for the jellyfish, I don't think this bright color works. I think it competes. So I'll set that aside. And then I have some other colors. This one I like because it's like a little bloom in the ocean, and the color goes well, but I do think it still competes. So I'm back to just kind of a boring blue, but I think that will look beautiful with this color. So that's what I'll use. I'll cut my piece of fabric for the background, a little bit large, and then I can trim it down to size. So I'll just trace around here. And I'll cut this background piece to size and set my card aside for now. So now I have my background and I want to work on my jellyfish. The main jellyfish is going to be over here, and I kind of have an idea of how I want to make it. I want to have a little dimension in it. So I want the part of the jellyfish, kind of the head, we'll call it, to be maybe this big. Yeah, it's pretty good. But I want it to kind of look ruffled. So to that end, I'm going to create a large circle. And I'll baste around it so that I get a little dimension to this piece. And that will be my main focal point. Again, I'm not sure this is going to work, but it is going to be fun trying. So I'll cut out my circle, cutting it a little larger, in fact, than what I traced out. So now I have my piece cut out, and I realize it's really big. Even if I crunch it down to the size, it's pretty big. So I'm going to trim it even further. And to do that, I'm just going to fold it over and over again and just cut the edge. So I cut a big piece off, and now I have a much smaller circle here. Can even trim it a little bit further. And now I'm just going to baste it all the way around. I have the thread 3042 that matches very closely. And now I'll choose which side I want for the exterior, and I'll stitch on the inside. And I'm just going to baste around the perimeter here. So I'm just going in and out. Now basting can be a temporary measure, or it can just be these large stitches. I'm doing it to achieve this little ruffle. So I keep stitching around and around here. When I come to the end, where I'm close to where I started, I want my needle to come up on the inside as well. And now I'll just pull this tight, and I have a little bonnet here. And that's perfect for a little jellyfish. I like that a lot. It looks quite realistic to me. And you could play with the size of this to make whatever size you want. This has a little bit of dimension, and I like that. So I'm going to just pull it taut, fan it out, and just stitch through it to hold it in place. Just use the thread that I have and make a few stitches to hold it in place. trim the ends of this thread, and I'll tuck that knot on the back when I stitch it down. And I'll flatten it out as well. But since that's my focal point, I want to work on my background piece. Because I'm making a smack of jellyfish, I want to have a few in the background. So I'm going to take some of the fabric. I don't need very much. Just trim off some pieces here. And I have a larger one. And here's a good sized piece of little fabric. And now I just want to cut the shapes out. Just a little circle. Can even come out a little here. And I'll do one over here as well on this piece of fabric. Might make it a little smaller. Now these are not going to have dimension like my focal point. The point of these is just to be background piece, and I want them to look like a group of jellyfish kind of floating through the water. So I'll trim these out. And now I have two jellyfish that I can add to my little card here. And then I'll have my main jellyfish. I like the way that looks. Flatten that out even a little further. So now I need to attach these. So now I'm going to stitch with very small stitches just around the perimeter, just enough to hold it in place. I'm going to leave the base of this jellyfish head here open so that I can stitch the legs underneath there. Just want to have little stitches going around just to tack it down. So I'll do this on this one as well as the next jellyfish, but not the dimensional one that we made. So now I want to make the little tendrils, the little legs of the jellyfish. And I want them to look like they're floating in the water, so they're not going to be straight lines. They're going to have a little curve and an arc to them. So I'll start with this one. Just have a bunch of little lines. And then the same thing with this one. And since this one seems to be floating away, I want its tentacles to kind of be floating away as well. And I want to have just enough legs to show up, but not be distracting, because ultimately I'm going to have this larger one go down as well, maybe here. So I want to come in there with my threads. I have all 6 strands, and again I'm starting with the color that matches this, and I'm going to create a stitch line just using the back stitch all the way down those lines that I drew. I'm going to use the same color. I want this to really look like it's part of one unit. I don't want it to distract from my dimensional one that's coming in, because for that one I'm going to use all my colors of thread. I just think that will look very interesting. So I'll continue to stitch all these lines with this thread, and that's the 3042. So I stitched the little tendrils coming down from the 2 jellyfish here, and now I want to work on this one. I've got to figure out exactly where I want it. I don't want it to be too clustered, but I do have quite a bit that I want to come out from it. So I might fold this piece down to make it even smaller. Flip it over here so that the knot's on the back. That's pretty good. So I'll take this and I'll maybe stitch it right there. Now I'm just going to tack it down on the sides here and here, because I want to be able to stitch the tendrils coming out. So I have just one strand of embroidery floss that I'm going to use coming in from the back of my project here. I'm just going to stitch down a couple of stitches just to anchor it in place. I'm going through a lot of stitches and a lot of fabric. And I'll clip off that other thread when I'm ready. So I have 2 stitches holding it in place right at the base. And now I want to play with the shape a little bit. Just like that. See how much I can tuck it. and still maintain that shape. So I'll start by stitching it down over here. Again, just little stitches and going across the top. But I'm not going to stitch the base of it down just yet. So I like the way that's coming along. I'll knot off my thread on the back here. You can see there's quite a bit of stitching. And now I want to play with this shape. I can always cut off my little basting stitches and just tack it down in place. There's a lot of fabric here. It's not looking the exact way that I want, but I do have a little bit of a shape developing. Right now I want to stitch down the top of this jellyfish. So I'll just make small little stitches right across here. And it's not necessary, at least I don't think it's necessary for me to stitch down this one. If I change my mind, I'll go back and do that later. So on second thought, I think I do need to stitch it down. So I'll just come up here while I have that single strand of floss on my needle and stitch it down. And once again, I'll anchor it into place with a knot on the back. So now that I have my two jellyfish in the back and this one here, I want to work on this one. I have my single strand of embroidery floss, the same color I've been using this entire time, the 3042. And now I'm going to just clip the pieces here that held this in place, this little basting stitch. And I can just play around with my piece. So I like that. I have it tacked down pretty well, but I can still get underneath it to stitch the tentacles here. So I'm going to come in with my thread. Now I have two colors here, two pieces, each 6 strands of floss on this thread, because I want to start creating those movable legs. Now the two colors I used were this one, the Unknown, and the 3042. So now I'm going to come up underneath my piece here. I want the knot and the piece to be buried. And I'm just going to clip it a little bit long. And then I'll do that again. I'll knot it at the base and do this with this thread as well as the others. The other two colors I threaded onto a needle. Again, 2 strands of floss. So I have all my strands of embroidery floss coming out, and I purposely kept them a little longer than I want. So right now I want to go in there and adhere that main jellyfish down. I'm going to come up with my needle, my single strand. Again, I'm going to make sure the fabric is exactly where I want it. And I'll come and just stitch it down. Just little stitches to anchor it in place. And when I'm happy with that positioning, I'll knot it on the back. And there's quite a little nest here of embroidery floss. So now from here, I want to decide how long I want these little tendrils to be. And I like that when they curve, they do interesting things. So maybe I'll just curve it around and then just snip it from there. So there I have my little jellyfish all done. Looking at it, I think I need some more tendrils coming out in different colors from the 2 in the back. At first I thought they would distract, but now I think I need just a few more. So I'll go in there with some thread and stitch some more lines down. Maybe I'll do one here and then a few out here. I don't even need that many, but I just want to create that effect. So here I've stitched additional tentacles for the back jellyfish, and I have the main one here. I'm quite pleased with how my little smack of jellyfish came out. So now I just want to stitch it to my card. I have some floss here knotted in a similar color to the blue. I'll just stitch around it in a few spots, tacking it down, and then I'll have my card for June complete. So there I have my completed card for June. I'm really thrilled with this one.
So that was my prompt for Deep Sea. It was really fun for me because I got to use some interesting fabric. It was quite beautiful, that satin, that purpley color. It's not something I work with very often, so it was really a treat. I did learn that I do not have a lot of purple in my stash. I also got to learn that a jellyfish grouping is called a smack, so that was kind of a fun little tidbit as well. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And also, please consider joining my channel as a member. There's behind the scenes content, just footage from members, and there's a whole library of videos that might help you in your slow stitching projects. There's also a little bit of inspirational and artist life photos as well. Thanks for joining me today.